Okay, we have Ian Flatley on our legal survival expert line. And look, this is something perhaps some of you haven't really given thought to, but Ian's going to explain. He's a prominent expert and authority on this subject of prenuptial agreements. Ian, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure, James.
So, first of all, for people that hadn't really had any contact with this, I mean, what exactly is a prenuptial agreement?
Well, first you have to begin with an understanding that the minute you get married in California, the state of California has written a contract for you. And that contract will apply if the marriage doesn't work and there's a divorce at some point later on down the road.
And that's what's called community property.
Community property is the overall body of law that governs the relationships between husband and wife in California or spouses.
So this is not true in other states?
No, it is not. There's a number of other states who do not utilize community property law. But that's probably beyond the purview of our discussion. Other states employ sometimes... they try to divide up the marital estate if there's a divorce, but specifically in California, they use community property law, which means from the minute that you're married, that everything you buy, everything you purchase, all of the money that you earn is jointly owned by you and your spouse.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, absolutely. We've just heard in the news that some big celebrities, Kelsey Grammer and Mel Gibson, did not have prenuptial agreements. They had these public separations and divorces, and it involved, massive amounts of money. But for the average person, a lot of people think, I really don't need this because I'm not a rich person. I'm just an ordinary person. Why would I have to, get involved with such a complicated document?
Right. So the scenario is you're thinking about getting married. If you're very young and you and your intended spouse really have nothing and you're going to be building a life together, you probably don't need a prenuptial agreement. Where you would need a prenuptial, what I see most commonly is people have gone through a divorce already. They tend to be older, they tend to be more established, they have money, they have property, and they have children from a prior marriage. And the prenuptial agreement will assist the parties in recognizing what is premarital property, which under California law is separate property, and keeping it separate during the marriage, so that if there's a divorce somewhere down the road, there is a quick way to divide up properties without having to go to a judge for a decision from the courts. And it just helps parties, if there is a divorce down the road, helps them divide up assets, etc.
So it's sort of like a blueprint in the event they had to separate or divorce. And that way, they don't have to litigate it. They don't have to go through the hassle of the back and forth.
That's correct. I mean, it's mostly it's helpful because let's say that you're thinking about getting married. You've been previously married before, and you have a house that you own. You may not necessarily want to make that house community property. So the prenuptial agreement would say this house during the marriage will remain my separate property, and if the marriage fails, it remains my separate property and cannot be divided. It stops a lot of fighting if there is a divorce because you've already agreed how this property is going to be treated if there's, a divorce situation.
And can a prenuptial agreement address non-property subjects, even like relation to children and custody and things like that?
No, we've got to be very careful when we're drafting prenuptials. There's certain items concerning, say, child support, the requirement that parents are required to support their children. We cannot deal with that in a prenuptial agreement. That's a public policy issue, and we can't contract away that right. Occasionally, you'll see prospective spouses agreeing on, say, the religion of a child, and how the child is to be brought up, and that just helps the spouses, so that there's no fighting later on about which religion, which kind of school, et cetera, et cetera. So that you can put into a prenuptial.
So it might be important for someone who's a serious Christian person who gets married to someone who's not, say, someone who's in the Church of Satan, that they would want to have a prenuptial agreement to make sure if they had children that they would keep them within the Christian religion. But that brings up the idea that sometimes young people, their parents will push them to seek a prenuptial agreement because of the assets that they may have in disproportion to their fiancés. Do you know what I mean?
Sure. I mean, that's it. If you have a young person who stands to inherit a large fortune, then the parents may want the child to have a prenuptial agreement again, so there's no fighting at the end of the day if the marriage doesn't work out.
And that's really a great thing. I mean, basically what you're talking about, it's a contractual agreement to prevent undue stress, undue burdens caused by not addressing these things beforehand, in a separation or divorce, and where it gets really ugly in terms of the clash between the two parties.
Right, and a lot of people, when they go into marriage, don't really understand community property law in California. Very complicated. It can lead to huge amounts of money being spent on litigation and attorneys to try to settle those issues. The prenuptial goes a long way to making sure that they never become an issue. And you address them before the marriage, so you don't have to go to a judge to ask for a ruling on those issues. So
it's preventive.
It is. It's very useful for people in that sense.
So lastly, Ian Flatley, the lawyer, prominent expert on these matters, what is a postnuptial agreement?
Well, after you get married, you can, in fact, enter into a contract with your spouse which alters property rights, support rights, etc. Those are called postnuptial agreements, and those are valid in California. Postnuptial agreements can modify a prenuptial agreement, or they can create new contract rights after the marriage, once again, so that property issues are settled, support issues are settled if you can. And again, it's just, if the marriage ends, those issues will have already been dealt with, and again, you don't have to go to court.
Well, I think we've settled that matter for this particular show, and I want to thank you so much, Ian Flatley, for joining us. And by the way, we're going to link on legalsurvival.org, link to flatleylaw.com, Ian Flatley's website, and he's located right here in Orange County. Thank you so much, Ian. Appreciate it.
My pleasure, James.